Nikki, you know I love when you present for the group. What have you got for us today?
Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about almost like what a day in my life was as a payer. So I was a payer from 2010 to 2017. And, you know, what did a general garden variety day look like? And I know that this is.
I'm going to stop you only because we're playing and we can.
Okay.
I'll introduce you and you can say, I want to tell you what it was like when I was a payer, which I was for 20 years. And then you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
The first 5 seconds of any video are the most important.
Okay.
Okay. We'll start. Nikki, you know I love when you present. What have you got for us today?
Thanks, Joe. I want to talk about what a day in my life was as a payer. I was a payer for 7 years, and this is how it worked when I evaluated a new technology. So by way of background, you know, I've presented a few times, so not too many people need too much of an in-depth background from me, but I spent those 7 years at Intermountain Healthcare. This over here is the main hospital. This is the biggest hospital in hundreds of miles, just in South Salt Lake, in a city called Murray. This is the health insurance company that's on the other side of the freeway from that hospital. This is the insurance company that's owned and operated by Intermountain Healthcare called Select Health. Intermountain Healthcare is in all of these different states at some capacity. Well, Intermountain Healthcare is what's called an integrated delivery network, which means the hospital and the insurance company are all in one. So you have all of the hospitals, the surgical centers, the clinics, and everything that is what most people around here know as Intermountain Healthcare. But then you have Select Health, which is the health insurance company that's owned and operated by Intermountain. Until a few years ago, it was called IHC Health Plans, Intermountain Healthcare Health Plans. And then they rebranded it, changed the name, called it Select Health, and built this a building out way far away from Salt Lake. I think it was on purpose, get the insurance company away. Those are the bad guys, we're the good guys. And then in 2010, they built this building, just a stone's throw from this big hospital, and kind of brought us back in. Well, integrated delivery networks are all over the United States. You have Geisinger and Kaiser Permanente, and of course, Intermountain Healthcare, and they perform medical services under the auspices of being one big happy family. But I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. This picture down here, this big granite wall, I took this picture in July. I went to Intermountain and had surgery, and I just laugh at this phrase. I mean, helping people live the healthiest lives possible is what this says down here in granite. And I just took a step back and I took a picture and I texted it to my wife and typed HA. And I just laughed, Joe, because what incentive does a hospital have to keep you healthy? None. A hospital's job is to treat you, bill your insurance company, treat you, bill your insurance company over and over and over again. Well, you would think, well, what if you had Select Health? They wouldn't want to be taking money from their own health plan. And I say, well, of course they do. Because I believe integrated delivery networks are a little bit of a farce. They're not integrated. There's a hospital right here that wants this place's money. And they operate as two separate businesses because legally they have to, and for other reasons. But there's no way this building right here wants you to live the healthiest life possible. Because when you get in a car accident, or you get lung cancer, or you get an ingrown toenail, and you show up at that building, they get to treat you and bill your insurance company for a certain CPT code, and they get reimbursed. So it just
Plus
makes
any
me
pay that I have to make.
Sorry, Joe, what was that?
Plus any copay I need to make.
Correct.
So the money that comes into the hospital equals what they get from Select Health plus me.
Yes.
Versus Select just gets from me.
Yeah, so every month you pay Select Health $1,000, And Select Health holds onto that money and says, we are willing to pay, according to our medical policies, physicians for treating you on our behalf. And you show up after getting pancreatitis after a night out drinking, and the hospital licks its chops and goes, sweet, we get to bill your insurance company for $500 for treating your pancreatitis. So why on earth would the hospital want you to live the healthiest life possible? Does your local auto body shop want you to drive responsibly and stay under the speed limit? Of course not. Now, they're not going to put out an advertisement and say, hey, everybody, New Year's Eve's coming, go get hammered and drive your car into a telephone pole.
Now, Gunter's going to be my guest next week, and he's long advocated a single payer system and believes that's where we need to go. And I have a healthy dose of skepticism since we can't seem to get anything passed. And so, yeah, not in my lifetime. But wouldn't you, first, you agree with the notion of a single payer system? I believe you do. And if so, isn't an IDM at least a step closer?
It is a step closer. I don't agree with, okay, let me spend just 2 minutes and explain my theory on
It's come on, Nikki.
Okay, it'll be 10. Single payer systems work not because there's only one payer and not because the government's in charge. They work because the physician works for the health insurance company. That's the reason. They no longer have an incentive to suck money away from that far distant health insurance company called Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, or whatever. They are the health insurance company. There is no differentiation.
Everyone's goals are aligned. We want
Yes.
healthy people.
Yes. See, I don't want single anything. I don't want single tennis shoe company. I don't want single automobile company.
Like multiple people, but everyone agreeing that healthy Joe is a better Joe.
Correct. And so here's
What
what
would that look like?
So physician, Peter Smith graduates from medical school. He goes to residency. He specializes in dermatology. After 5 years of dermatology residency, currently, he would apply for a job as an insurance company money extractor at St. John's Hospital. I would say, why doesn't Aetna buy St. John's Hospital, take St. John's off the top, put Aetna up there, and say, hey, we need 6 dermatologists and 4 brain surgeons and 16 pediatricians and 32 OBGYNs. And they put it up, and this physician Smith would go apply for that job and as a dermatologist at Aetna, treating Aetna members according to Aetna medical policies. And now there's no CPT codes, there's no prior authorizations, there's nothing. A patient walks in with their Aetna health insurance card and they say, welcome, come on in. What seems to be the problem? And they say, oh, I have indigestion. Great, let's look at our indigestion medical policy that I wrote, because not only am I the chief of gastroenterology, I'm the medical director of gastroenterology. I wrote the policy, and I wrote the policy according to well-defined research, good clinical publications. So first we're going to try Tums, and then we're going to try surgery, and then on and on and on. So Joe, in this world, you get all the benefits of a single payer system, meaning where the physician and the insurance company's incentives are aligned, but you have a dozen options.
Let me go back to what we said before with your Intermountain Real IDN example. We said, yeah, but the money is in the treatment, not in the premiums. So you've packaged it differently. Doesn't Aetna Corp that owns St. John's Hospital still want medical procedures done?
No.
Because there's more money in that than there is just collecting premiums?
No, because there's no billing mechanism. So there's no extraction of money from somebody else. So Aetna, let's say, for example.
Okay. So basically, any services rendered is cost of goods sold.
Yes.
So
Correct.
wouldn't there be a motive to make sure I spend as little on my cost of goods sold, and theoretically throw in a little malevolence that we cut a little corners because we don't really need that brand of this, we could do that, and we don't need to do that procedure, we could get away with that.
Yes, but only to the extent that you get optimal outcomes, because I don't want that patient coming back and I have to do another procedure because I cut a corner 6 weeks ago.
And I suppose we could all compete on that level and say that Aetna patients are healthier than United Health patients.
Yeah, if United Healthcare Hospital down there is trying to hold on to those premiums and they don't want to pay 2 cents for anything, they'll lose business. Everyone will cancel their policy with them and they'll go to Aetna. It would be a free market.
I'm going to say thank you. You made a point that was clear enough for me, which is a pretty low bar. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay. So let's say this is the typical path a medical device would go to arrive on my desk. This product is called X-Stop. X-Stop has R&D for 5 years, and
Is this a made-up thing or is it real?
Real. This is a real medical device.
Okay.
I'm just using it as an example that you know how to develop a medical technology. It's going to take 4, 5, 6 years in biometric testing, biomedical testing, on and on and on. Then you go to the FDA and you say, hey, we want to be a class 2 device or a class 3 device. The FDA gives a thumbs up to your device and says, okay, you've proven to us safety and efficacy.
And that's when the stock photo was taken?
Yes.
At that point in the transaction?
Yes. At this
Okay.
point now, the FDA says, job well done.
And your team goes,
My
okay.
team, the health economics and market access team goes, whoa, 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 stop. I don't care what the FDA says. The FDA gives you permission to go to market. That doesn't mean you should. So right here, you know, your sales rep goes and talks with this orthopedic surgeon and neurosurgeon and says, hey, you should use X-Stop, we're FDA approved. The surgeon goes, great. They implant it in a Select Health member and a bill goes to Select Health. Well, at that point, it works its way through the system eventually to the medical director who goes, X-Stop, I've never heard of X-Stop. What is this thing? Maybe he or she does a quick Google search and gets an idea of what this is. At that point, the medical director in the real world walked down the hallway right here on the 3rd floor and walked down to my desk and said, Nick, there's this thing called X-Stop. We've been billed for it 6 times in the last month. What the heck is this thing? Go do your research. I do my research and I get angry and go, why was I the last guy to know about X-Stop? Why did X-Stop go straight to a physician and then the physician put it in a Select Health member and then I'm just told to pay for it? Hold on a minute. How much would anybody tolerate that if Joe, I went to dinner.
No, believe me, I get it. Lucas comes home with cereal that is way overpriced and I'm like, I have to pay for this? He's like, well, I already ate it.
Yes.
I'm like, well,
Yes.
there's discount cereal at grocery outlet.
Yeah, and why didn't you talk to Daddy Joe 20 minutes before you went and bought that? And then Joe can say, yes, I will pay for that, or no, I won't. Well, here's how the path should have been. The path should have been that X-Stop talks to the FDA and Select Health at the same time. So you know that the FDA is going to say, hey, we're going to require 20 patients randomized prospective, and then you'll get your class 3 distinction and you can go to market. At the same time, they're talking to me and the health insurance companies to go, guys, what do you need? And Select Health and Aetna and Cigna and Blue Cross and Medicare and all of them go, thank you so much for asking me and not waiting until this stage to come, you know, forcing me to pay for it. Thank you for treating me like an adult and bringing me in early in the discussion so that I can say, we need 200 patients randomized prospective over 48 months. And you go, holy cow, that's double, triple what the FDA is asking us. And you go, yeah, because the FDA ain't writing checks. I am. So this is how it is. Whoops, excuse me. This is how it is. This is how it should be. Companies should be bringing health insurance considerations in very, very early in this discussion. So this is a little infographic type thing that I use to describe this. That's the new technology, that's the provider, and that's the payer. And I don't think it requires that much discussion. I really do think that mom is the health insurance company and the provider is the individual that wants the new toy. Now, again, for anybody on this call that's a physician, I'm not calling physicians children. That it's just a nice analogy. That I know what the physician wants. The physician wants a device that's quick and easy, that is not going to diminish their RVUs, or the amount of money that they're going to get reimbursed. They want something that's good for their patients, that's going to provide nice outcomes. I get that. Physicians aren't emotionless. They want what's right for their patient. And yet they're not the one writing the check. This person is.
Mhm.
So if you're developing this new medical technology, you need to be discussing this at the same time with the provider and with BCBS to make sure that you're getting both people's views. Why develop something that this individual is not going to want? Because if they don't want it, this person will never get a bill for it. So you got to talk to doctors and say, what do you want? We're thinking about developing a new medical device or diagnostic test that's going to do X, Y, and Z. How does that sound to you? And the doctor goes, that sounds really cool. I'd really
Let me
like that.
direct you and say, okay, we've enjoyed our little time with Nick's ideal scenario. What am I supposed to do with this? Because Nick's ideal scenario is not how it is.
Yeah. So
Is there a next slide that tells me that, what I should be doing?
Let me look and make sure. No, there's not. Let me answer your question. We all know how to get a hold of doctors in new product development. You know, everybody's got a physician friend, or you can
Do
go
we still need the slides?
Sorry?
Do we still need the slides?
Yeah, because the next step will be telling you kind of how I did this very much in the real world.
Well, let's see that.
Well, let me answer your question about in my starry-eyed world about how a medical device executive would get mom's opinion on their medical device. Companies need to host more often payer advisory boards. So a payer advisory board is where we all know how to get a clinician advisory board. You just ask 20 orthopedic surgeons to come to a hotel and you pay them all per diem, and they all go home and they gave you some good advice. Well, a payer advisory board's the same thing. You get a medical director of these places, these insurance companies, to all come together in a nice hotel room in Miami. And you say, guys, here's what we're developing. What evidence would you need to reimburse for this? And they go, thank you so much, Joe, for inviting me early.
Do these things exist?
Yeah, they do. So I was on one for HeartFlow, which is a company out of California, fractional flow reserve computed tomography for coronary arteries. I was on their payer advisory board in 2016 or so, and it was fantastic. Sitting next to me was the VA. Sitting on this side of me was Aetna. On the other side of the table was Stephen Crawford from Cigna. And you had probably 10 different health insurance companies in the room, while their chief medical officer, Dr. Campbell, or Campbell was his first name, can't remember his last name. Their chief medical officer stood up there for 6 hours and said, here's the problem with current coronary artery imaging. And here's what our technology is, and we're so much better for these reasons. Here's our evidence. Here's the clinical trials we've done. Everything good, or do we need to do a little bit more? And all of us payers sitting in the room were like, guys, you're doing this right. Thank you so much for doing this, for letting us come and give input on what we are and are not willing to reimburse for our members.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm thinking, is the opportunity that so few manufacturers do this that you can? Because if everyone said, oh, wow, yeah, payer advisory boards, that's, or committee, I don't remember what you said, there would never be enough time for, you need dedicated people should go on road shows and see things forever.
Yeah, so there's a company called Evidira, and Eric Faulkner works at Evidira, and he's the one that hosted this payer advisory board. And Eric Faulkner, I don't know if he's still doing it. It's been a number of years now, but companies like Evidira.
EVIDERA.com. Go on. It's in
Correct.
Seattle, actually.
They're part of PPD, a big contract research group. And so,
PPD, right, it says that they acquired them. I don't remember, let's see if it says when. Go on.
yeah, that I would advise anybody on this call, if you've got a little bit of venture capital money and you're 2 years away from going to market, 3 years away from going to market, that you host a payer advisory board and you get Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, United, and all of these companies into the room. Also, don't forget, Joe, payers are things like the Indian Health Services and the VA. So maybe your technology is really fit for the Indian Health Service demographic.
How much does one of these cost?
I'm not sure. I got a $2,000 honorarium. They paid for my airfare and hotel to fly from Utah to Orlando. So for just me, I was probably $3,000.
And how many were you?
Maybe 10.
Okay, so there's 30 grand.
Yeah. And then
The
whatever.
company Evidera makes money.
Yeah, Evidera makes a few bucks to host it and organize it and put
So
it
somewhere
on.
between, say, 60 and 80, maybe.
Probably.
Okay.
I
So
would
it's interesting. I long ago, Gunter taught me that to get anything through, you're going to need clinical, operational, and financial. Financial is value analysis committee slash payers. We've talked about a clinical advisory board, a payer advisory board. Is there such a thing as an operational advisory board?
I don't know.
I know that's not in your domain, but I wonder now.
I don't know. That might be kind of like a multidisciplinary, you've got R&D people in the room, you've got,
Yeah,
I don't know, that's a good question. That might
maybe
be.
we should go into business and start. Oh, you're busy.
Let's do this. No, I've never.
Tell me your next slide, and for some reason your audio's gone wonky, but go on. Let's go to the next slide.
I want to talk a little bit about my process.
I can't really make out what we're seeing there on the left.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is really small, but I wanted
Levels of evidence.
Yeah, these are levels of evidence that everybody listening to this should almost memorize this thing. Let me go back. If I was not in presentation, I'd just drag it and make it bigger. But so there's a million different ways to.
I'm going to need to splice this because you're like talking like a robot now with so much static.
It did that last time.
Why don't you leave and come back?
Okay. So Joe, let me tell you about kind of my process while I was a payer, about how I actually did my work and how I viewed this. I'll start. Let me start real quick by reiterating something I said a minute ago. The way this normally worked is the physician did the thing to the patient, then the bill came to us, and then it went to the medical director, and then the medical director said, Nick, what is this? Please go do your review. At that point, I go, I've never heard of XStop. What is this thing? I go to PubMed, I type in XSTOP, I hit search, maybe I get 3 papers. Then I go to all these other databases and I do the same thing. I type in XSTOP from Hayes and ECRI and all these companies, and I start to gather evidence. That takes me a few days to do that. I go to the company's website and I try to pull evidence from them. And then I start to grade that evidence. I want to know, how good is this evidence? Not all evidence is the same. So this tiny little table, sorry, it's probably so small for everyone to read, but there's a bunch of different levels of evidence grading criteria out there. So just like when you're rating a restaurant, there's Yelp, there's there's Google, there's all these different ways to grade how good of a restaurant is. Well, same thing goes for this. Well, one of these levels of evidence criteria is this one right here. The best of the best of the best evidence that you can provide to a health insurance company. They're high quality meta-analyses and systematic reviews. And then you go all the way down to level 4 evidence, which is expert opinion. So that's why I will say, and it drives physicians crazy when I say that, but I go, when I have an opinion about a medical device, it's level 1 evidence. When a physician has an opinion about a medical device, it's level 4.
Will you reimburse something that's a level 4 only?
Probably not, unless it is 12 standard deviations out there, one patient in a million, and there's no other option. And the physician says, guys, once in 5 careers will you see a patient like this? My only option is to do X, Y, and Z. And you go for it. I guess we're going to have to reimburse for it.
So if we were to be linear about this and say, let's say you're still there, if you want to get reimbursed at Intermountain Health, you're going to run into this Nick Anderson guy. He's going to look up the level of evidence you have, and unless you have a blank, he's going to say no. What is that number?
I think that's probably safe, and it's going to be level 2 or above, 2+ or above.
Okay,
so there's
and that
also,
represents what?
So level 2+, well-conducted case control cohort studies with low risk of confounding or bias and moderate probability that the relationship is causal. We'll probably even go up to 2++ and say, unless you have a randomized controlled trial, I'm not doing this. I'm not reimbursing. Now that's where regulatory would come in and say, we don't have to have an RCT to get FDA approval. And I go, yeah, that's why the bar of evidence for FDA is so much lower than what it is for insurance. So take whatever the regulatory says and quadruple it, and that's probably what you're going to need for reimbursement.
In absolute, then I could say getting reimbursed is harder than getting cleared.
Yeah, I think without a doubt. You can get FDA clearance in a number of months. You know, if you're a class 2 and there's a really good predicate device, you know, a number of months, maybe a year. You know, Michelle Lott knows this far better than I do, but you know, call it 1 or 2 years and you've got the stamp of approval from the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, almost never is that enough evidence to garner reimbursement. I mean, you've just begun. So that's why you may as well talk to the regulatory consultant and say, what do you think we need? And they say 20 patients over 12 months. And then you have your payer advisory board and they say 90 patients over 3 years. And you go, great, I'll do that because it encompasses this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kill those 2 birds with that one clinical trial. So I'm not.
It sounds as though, you know, we have pre-subs for FDA. We should have pre-subs for payers because it's going to be more stringent than what you need for FDA. And if you could do that, then you really have won.
Correct. Yeah, and that
it's too scary, I imagine, if you're raising funds, if your investment community understood that.
Yeah, and that pre-sub for payers may be like a payer advisory board, where you say, we just hosted an 8-hour meeting at a nice hotel in Orlando, and we had 10 payers in there. We paid $100,000 for this meeting. We videoed it, we wrote it down. We had 10 people from our company diligently taking notes every time Aetna or Blue Cross opened their mouths. We're pretty certain we know precisely what they want. Furthermore, we've gone and read all of their medical policies on lumbar spinal stenosis. We know what they say. And every time a study comes out that's less than 24 months, they say in their medical policy that due to short-term follow-up periods, we cannot ascertain the clinical benefit of this technology. And you go, ding, 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 that's too short of a period of time. Irrespective of what is needed for regulatory, we need to go 10 times, or not 10 times, double that amount of time in order to give them what they want, because they say it in their medical policy.
Okay.
So Joe, during my process, I would sit back and I would go, I know what the economic role of Intermountain Healthcare is. I don't think that they are partners with us, even though we're the same company. Their job is to get my money, and my money is my members' money. And my members' money, they diligently pay me $1,000 a month in their monthly premium, and they don't want me to make it $1,020 next year.
I want to be clear because you have some pronouns in there. Intermountain is not whose partner.
Select Health's.
Okay, so it's an integrated delivery network, but really a name only.
Yes.
Please go to the next bullet point.
I was concerned first and foremost with clinical utility, not clinical validity. I need evidence.
Now that I see that I jumped too fast. Utility versus validity, please.
So On another kind of level of evidence thing that you could create that only has 3 or 4 of them. The bottom is analytical validity. That's the real nerdy biomedical numbers. The
Does
next
it work?
Sorry?
Does it work?
Yeah, that, you know, when it sends a pulse, does this thing happen over here?
Mhm.
Nerdy stuff that none of us care about that are higher up in this food chain type thing. Analytical validity. The next step is clinical validity, which is like sensitivity and specificity. How often, when you have a implantable defibrillator, does your heart screw up and it sends a shock? 99% accurate, 96% accurate. That's clinical validity.
I love it if, and I can maybe overlay this later, if you have a page that shows utility, validity, and that kind of thing, and what you need, that'd be a great.
I'll look it up. I'm sure somebody's created something, or I'll just make one.
Okay, yeah.
So analytical validity, clinical utility is, that's great that it does shock your heart appropriately when it's supposed to, 99.9 times out of 100. But what difference does it make? Does it improve overall survival? Does it decrease emergency room visits? Tell me, please, that though it works as it's supposed to, that it makes a hill of beans difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very top is health economics. So I was concerned first and foremost with clinical utility, not health economics. I do my own health economics internal because I have the data. I was concerned with clinical utility. Joe, that's fantastic. You've invented a diagnostic test that is 99% accurate for telling 3-year-olds that they're going to get Alzheimer's one day. But that's great clinical validity. That is useless clinical utility. It doesn't make any difference. So next step down, I read everything. And I mean everything. I read every paper, everything where xStop came up. I read it. I read blogs. I read Dr. Jones's medical blog that 12 people read every 6 years. I read it. I wanted to know what his level 4 evidence was. I read what was on the company's website, PubMed, everywhere. I read everything. So here's places of things that I read: PubMed, ECRI, CADTH, NCCN guidelines, and so on. And this was the one that drove me crazy, is I would very rarely see a 4 payers tab on a website.
I made a website that has 4 payers because of you.
I love it. Because you didn't, Joe, let me tell you this. Dr. Jones went to a medical conference in San Diego, California, you know, the American Society of Orthopedic Surgery meeting. He heard about a thing called xStop. He went back to Salt Lake City. He golfs with me, or, you know, whatever. He pings me. He does it the right way and says, "Hey, Nick, I've got a Select Health member I want to implant this in, but I want to make sure you'll reimburse me for it. I just heard about it in San Diego yesterday." And I go, "Oh, I don't know. Let me go to xstop.com." And, oh, they don't have anything. So unbeknownst to xStop, they don't even have a sales rep in Utah. Select Health, the insurance company, already knows about him and is writing a medical policy denying coverage for it. And that should make everybody's blood run chill, is be like, oh boy, I better be careful before I let the cat out of the bag of what my new technology is and start going to trade shows, you know, spouting off about how cool our technology is, because there may be a payer, 1, at the meeting, and 2, those physicians are going to go back and talk to the insurance companies if they do the game.
How about this? We were talking about how a payer advisory board will give you even more information than a pre-sub or FDA. But if you do that first, by definition, wouldn't you be making unsubstantiated claims?
Yeah. So what you have to do during those payer advisory board meetings is you say, everybody, I know that your blood pressure is already up here. I'm going to bring it down. We are not selling this or marketing this until 2026. You don't need to worry about us going out and doing this. We are here to lick your boots. You are our customer. You are our customer. You are our customer. The physician is the purchasing agent. You are our customer. We are not going to do anything to disappoint you. Joe, I'm not kidding. lay it on thick to these guys during your payer advisory board and just say, we are here to provide you with a really great medical technology that is going to keep your premiums down, keep your members' premiums down, and only do the best to improve clinical utility by improving outcomes. And the insurance, all those payers in that room go, thank you so much for not treating us like the jerk that is just keeping the child from getting the toy that they want.
Mm-hmm. But then you start everything and saying, absolutely everything we're about to say for the next 8 hours is not clinically approved, and therefore I'm going to make presumptive claims I hope to make when I can prove it, if you think that if I do that, you would pay for it.
Correct. Just be painfully honest and say, we are about to conduct this 200 patient.
Or should I even bother, because you wouldn't even pay for it if I did. So save me $500,000 worth of clinical trials that you just don't care about.
Correct.
Great. Okay. I would write an HTA standing for
Health Technology Assessment.
Okay.
An HTA can be 10 pages, it can be 200 pages. I would write big HTA on xStop and say, here's what the evidence is. Here's what the current standard of care is. Here's how these two things compare. We should or we should not be reimbursing for this thing.
Okay.
I partnered with our in-house actuaries. So when I would get big nationwide data on just how severe of a problem lumbar spinal stenosis is, I'd be like, yeah, I don't really care. I have my own actuaries on the 5th floor. Julene Wadsworth and Doug Elmer were the two that I worked with. And I would go up to them and say, hey, you two, would you mind pulling me these CPT codes and telling me how many times we were billed last year for lumbar spinal stenosis? And they go, yep, 1,241 times. And I go, okay, of those 1,241 times, how many of those patients went on to get opioids? 1,200 of them. Okay, how many of those went on to surgery? How many of those had a revision surgery within 6 months? You know, and I could get my own internal data to go, well, wait a minute, what the company's telling me is the clinical odyssey is not what we are actually seeing here at Intermountain Healthcare. I presented the data at our MTech committee every 6 weeks. Our MTech committee had about 10 people on it, and they were all voting members but me. And I just wanted to drive home, Joe, for everybody. I wish for everyone to know just how focused we were on the data. I hear this said all the time from people that I just don't think have the authority to say it, that insurance companies only want to reimburse for things for as long as that member is going to stay on their health plan. Like, never in 7 years did that ever come up. And I've had people go, well, yeah, maybe not at Intermountain. It's like, knock it off. Quit telling me that we were the outlier. We were the weirdos who did it a different way. This is the same way Cigna does it. This is the same way Aetna does it. This is the same way Blue Cross Blue Shield of every state does it. That we never sat back smoking a big cigar with our feet up on our desk, being like, well, these sons of guns are going to be off our plan in 24 months, so screw them. They'll be Medicare's problem. We never said that. That doesn't come into our calculus. We are rigid, dogged scientists in that room. We have actuaries. If you've ever, there's like 9 levels of exams you have to take to be an actuary. It's unbelievable how intelligent they are. They're clinical nerds like me that are reviewing medical data and doing health economics. There's physician, nurse, and nurse in the room. None of us are sitting back with malfeasant motives to say, well, the primary patient population are 64. They'll be on Medicare a year later. We won't even see the benefit for 3 years. We're not going to reimburse for this. Never, Joe. It doesn't work that way. That we're all in there reviewing the scientific literature. We are looking at the outcomes. We are comparing these two things, and then we write an appropriate medical policy and let the chips fall where they may. If we have to raise everyone's premiums 20 cents per member per month, well, sorry, we have to, because the evidence is good that we should be reimbursing for this. There was never that malfeasant discussion in a smoke-filled room of us saying, you know, screw these guys. No. These are our members. And by the way, we're those members. I had my own health insurance for my health insurance. And
I believe this is your last slide. Is that right?
that's it, Joe.
Okay, let's take off the slide share. And the biggest thing I took away is this notion of a payer advisory board and how crucial it can be for your development and success. Would
Yeah.
you say that there's a point greater than that that I should take away? Or if I remember one thing from this presentation, it's that.
That and clinical utility.
And I think maybe I'll have you back and you can talk to me about that.
Okay.
Because
That'd be a good topic.
and maybe that follow up with that, what these levels are.
Joe, let me tell you really quickly that too often people make an ipso facto jump from clinical validity to clinical utility that they're not allowed to do. That we do this all the time when we say, well, if I just cut the amount of fat that I eat, I won't have a heart attack. And you're like, oh, no, like you're not allowed to do that. I know that logically that makes sense because a heart attack is a bunch of fat in your heart that kills you. But I don't know that there's evidence that says cutting the amount of fat that you eat leads to this. Logically, that makes sense. Now, maybe there is evidence and there might be a zillion papers out there. So maybe that's not my best example, but you're not allowed to make these logical jumps. You have to prove it stepwise until you are.
I would like to have you back to talk about that.
Okay. Too
But in the
often I was
meanwhile-
given data from companies that was merely clinical validity. And they'd say, Nick, how stupid are you if you can't see that this leads to this? And I'm like, sorry, you don't get to do that. You have to go prove this. Well, Nick, that's 10 million bucks. Not my problem, your problem. Go raise $10 million and do this because this is what I want. I don't want clinical validity. It's not enough.
I hope a lot of people are watching this last minute of the recording, because then you have enjoyed all of what Nick has to say and you understand why I keep inviting him back. I had never heard of payer advisory boards before, and now it will definitely be part of any advice I give to any of my clients. So Nicholas Anderson, ladies and gentlemen, and you'll be at 10X in May 2022. You can meet him there, and you'll be hosting another workshop. They're always well attended. Nick, thank you, and thank you all for watching. Bye for now. And stop recording.